Hi guys, this is part 3 of my series on the Carpark task. So in the last part of the series, I created this file, which is a Python module, and this runs using the Flask framework. When we start our web server, we have a function here, initializeDB, which makes sure that the database is set up with the correct fields. And then we have two routes. This is the route when you first go to the website, and it just returns this text, hello from Flask. And then this is a route which is accessed when we go to /park on the website, and it allows us to make cars enter or leave the car park, and it returns some JSON data which goes back to the browser. So we saw that last time by actually typing directly into the URL the park address, and then providing this parameter in the URL. So we're saying reg equals abc1234. Reg is the name of the variable. abc1234 is the value that we want to give it. And that is then being received by this Python program. And then the Python program is using the registration plate to search in the database. And then depending on whether it's into the database or not, we will either add the car to the database or remove the car from the database and display the amount of time that the car was in the car park. So when we run that, at the moment, we just get this JSON data that's returned to the browser. And if I hit the refresh button, you can see that now the car leaves the car park, refresh, and the car goes back into the car park, refresh, and the car leaves the car park. But what we want to do is to have a user interface for this rather than just typing everything in directly here. So to create that user interface, I'm going to make an HTML file. I'll go to my text editor and make a new file. And we're just going to use very simple HTML for this. So first of all, I'll make a body tag. And then inside the body, I'm going to have a form. Now the form will have an input box, and I'll just call that registration input. And then we're also going to have a submit button. Now I'm going to save this into a folder inside my main app folder. So this is the folder where my main app is stored. You can see the files in here. There's the app.py file. And there's also the database file. I'm going to create a new folder inside, and I'm going to call it static. Now, by default, Flask knows that the static folder will contain files which need to be sent directly to the client. So these aren't dynamic files where we're running some program code. These are just static files that are going to be sent directly. So let's call this park.html. Now, if I go back to the browser, I can now go to this HTML file by typing /static/park.html. And if I enter, you can see there's the HTML file that I've just created. Now, of course, we don't want to type that in. What we really want to do is bring up this page when we first go to the website. But that's an easy thing to do because we can use a redirect. So if I go back to my app.py, what I'm going to do is this page where I go to when I first visit the website. So currently it says hello from Flask. I'm going to replace that with a redirect command. So I'll write flask.redirect. And then where do I want to go? Well, I want to go to /static/park.html. Now if I save that back and I hit reload here, and then you'll see that it automatically takes me to /static/park.html. So if I type in the web address, immediately redirected, and then I go to this as my starting page. Okay, now I've got a form here, and if I type something into the form and click the submit button, at the moment it will just reload the page. So what I need to do is use a little bit of JavaScript to process the form and then interact with the JSON API that I created earlier on. So I'm going to go back to my HTML file, and now I'll type script to add in some JavaScript. And the submit button is going to submit this form. I need to give the form an ID, so let's call it Park Form. So now I'm going to add an event listener. Add event listener. The event I'm waiting for is the submit event. Now, when we submit the form, as you will have seen earlier on, the default behavior is actually to reload the web page. But I don't want to do that. So first of all, I'm going to put event.prevent default. Okay, that prevents the default action of reloading the page. Now I need to do some of my own work on the data in the form. So the first thing I'm going to do is read the text inside the reg input. So reg equals reg input value, and then I'm going to add the trim command just to get rid of any white space at the beginning or the end of that registration number. Now to check everything's working so far, I'm just going to log that to the console. If I save that back and then reload this, let's open up the console here so that we can see what's happening, and I'll type in ABC1234, hit submit, and you can see that's being logged on the console. Okay, now the next step is I want to take that registration number and I want to send it to the park route that I created in the last video. Okay, so I can do that very easily by using JavaScript to request a page. So in JavaScript, I can request a page by writing window.fetch and then the address, which is /park. And then I want to provide the registration number that was entered. So I'll write reg equals, and then I'm going to substitute the reg variable. Now, I'm doing this using the backtick quotation mark. So the backtick is normally on the top left of your keyboard. And if you use the backtick as a quotation mark, then you can write $ and open curly brackets, and then a close curly bracket after the variable name, and JavaScript will substitute that variable into that space. Okay, now that will fetch the page, but I don't just want to fetch the page, I want to actually get the JSON that the page sends back, and then use that JSON to display information to the user. So first of all, we're waiting for the JSON to be sent back. Now that's not going to happen immediately. So that means that this function actually can't execute all at once. It needs to execute in stages. And when that's the case, we need to mark the function as async, which is short for asynchronous. So just to repeat that, what we're saying is that this function doesn't execute all at once. It's actually going to execute, and then there will be a period where we need to wait. And then once we get a response from the server, then we're going to continue with the next part of the function. So the part where we're waiting for a response from the server is here. This is when we're asking JavaScript to go and get that web page for us. So in front of that, we put the await command. So this async in front of the function, and then await in front of when we want to wait for some information to come back from the web server. That's a common pattern in JavaScript. Now I need to store that, so I'm going to put const response equals. And that's going to store the response that I get from the web server. Now that response isn't just JSON data, it also contains a bunch of other data. So if we want to get just the JSON data out of it, then I'm going to use the second line, and we'll put JSON data equals await response.json. So this just gets the JSON part out of the JSON data. Okay, now if I log that to the console, and we'll see the data being sent back. So I'll save that and go back to my web page, reload it, and then submit. And you can see here that in the debug window, here is the data that's been sent back from the web server. So we've got the time that the car went into the car park, and then we've got the type, which is entry, because the car's going into the car park. If I hit submit again, here's the second data from the server. Now, because this is the same registration, the car's now departing the car park, and here's the duration that the car was in the car park, so 15 seconds roughly. I can click it again, there's an entry, and then click it again, there's a departure. So each time I click the button, we're requesting that park web address again, And the server is updating the database and sending us back some JSON data that we can process on the client side. So now we've got the JSON data, it's really just a question of using what we know about JavaScript to turn it into a more attractive user interface. So as a simple example, I could create a div here. I'm going to call it message. And then I can have a look at the type field in the JSON data. So one possibility is that JSON data.type equals entry. And if JSON data.type equals entry, then I'm going to set the text in the message to say the car entered the car park. And then another possibility is that the JSON data type is a departure. And if that's the case, then the message is going to say the car departed after, and then the time is stored in JSON data.duration seconds. Okay, so I'm using that backtick notation again to substitute the variable into the string. Now, there shouldn't be any other data types because on the server-side program, I only allowed for these either entry or departure as the types of JSON response. So just to make sure that that's the case, I'm going to add a throw error in here. I'm basically just adding that so that if I added a response at some future date, then this is going to cause an error on the client side, and hopefully I'll notice that and I'll remember that I need to fix the client side as well. So now if we go back and test that out, and then I'll enter this, and when I click submit, you can see it says the car entered the car park. If I click submit again, it tells us that the car departed after 4.5 seconds. I'll click submit, entered the car park. Give it a little bit longer this time. And then the next time I click submit, we should see maybe about 10 seconds. Okay, about 8 seconds there. You can see that now we've integrated the JSON API that we created earlier on with the web page. And obviously you can use all sorts of JavaScript and CSS effects to make this look more attractive. Now, just as a note, I would be tempted here, especially if I had a lot of data types, to use JavaScript switch statement rather than writing a bunch of ifs. So what you can do is switch here and then write case for the different possibilities. This is basically exactly the same as writing if statements, but it's just a little bit neater. The only thing is you have to remember to write break at the end of each case. This is something that inherited from the C programming language, and honestly, they could have made it better, but I guess they didn't. So if I write it using switch and case, it looks a bit like this, which arguably is a neater way to write the code, but it does exactly the same thing. Just test it out, submit, 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 submit. There we go. And that's updating the database on the server side, sending the details back using JSON, and then displaying it on the client side using JavaScript. So I hope that makes sense, guys. I'm going to leave it there. And if you do have any questions, then just ask me in class.